welcome everyone. We have Dr. Isaac Chemanam, who's the Associate Program Director for Anesthesiology Residency at the Maine Medical Center, who will be chatting with us and letting us know more about the role of the Associate Program Director in a busy residency.
I'm glad to be here chatting with you
Fantastic.
about this.
How would you describe your dream resident?
Wow. So dream resident, I think I try not to sort of have a very fixed idea of what that is, but essentially you are looking for a resident, a prospective resident who is bright, intellectually curious, shows a strong work ethic, and who is sort of coming in with the right attitude, recognizing that residency is a long sort of and quite arduous period of training. I think the most important thing I probably look for is the right attitude and sort of any sort of inkling I may get on their work ethic. So these would probably be the two strongest qualities I look for. Performance in exams, or even, how bright or smart they are, that is important. But I think it comes second to the attitude, because I think I'm sure you've seen the same thing. You can, if a resident has the right attitude, he can really, get the most out of the training program and turn out to be an excellent clinician. So that's what I'm looking for.
And
Sure.
who else make that committee?
So in our program, I can tell you that it is the program committee. The chairman of our department is also part of the committee, as is vice chair of education. We additionally have 3 other members, and it tends to be a rotating group of clinicians. We try to get good representation, and again, these are 3 clinicians from the core teaching faculty. And we try and vary the sort of makeup of the committee every few years, just to get a fresh set of eyes. The fixed positions stay fixed. Like, for instance, a program director and APD tend to be in a position for a few years, but we do try and sort of change the other members from time to time, just to get new perspective.
Once the program receives the applications from all the the medical students, medical graduates, what happens next? How does it then reach you or the program director?
So we have our program is structured slightly differently in that we have a program director, and I'm the associate program director. We also have an assistant program director of recruitment. So this is one of our colleagues who was an ex-program director himself. So he is very, he knows the system really well. So he works very closely with our residency coordinator to actually initially do the screening or first look of all the applications that come through. And to be honest, I know there are different programs that have, they use certain filters and things like that. Our program thought about that and pretty much decided that we want to have at least one member of the committee look at every application before discarding it for any reason. So prospective students have put in their applications. We want to give them the courtesy of actually reading their applications. So
absolutely.
We make it a point to read every application. For instance, last year, we have 5 spots in our program. We had close to 940 applications. And between the various attendings reviewing the applications, we actually looked at all of them.
Absolutely. I mean, those numbers look very much like even in internal medicine. It's about like 180 or 200 applications for one position.
Spot, yeah.
So yes, it could end up being a lot of applications. And I agree with what you're saying, because when I also did my internal medicine residency, I do remember my program director also saying that they review every application. And also on the other hand, there are some programs, just like you mentioned, that set filters. And I guess no one's ever going to know
Yeah.
how they process that. But
Yeah.
it's very, very encouraging to know that some programs like yours are willing to actually go through the application and make a decision
Yeah.
and go from there. So after the initial review, I mean, certainly you're going to decide, okay, we're going to call this person for interview, or we're not going to call this person for interview. Is there some kind of like a wait list or like a backup list?
So I think every program has its sort of system of scoring applications and deciding who to invite for an interview. We have a kind of similar system where we score our applications used on certain objective sort of criteria that we've set. Um, and at the same time, there's a certain gut feeling you get when you read a really good application, combine that with excellent sort of rotation evaluations, dean's letter, and even a very sort of well-written, well-thought-through personal statement. And if whoever's reading the application feels really strongly that this is going to be a great potential candidate, we have the ability to directly sort of put them in a separate file where we those are our first picks for inviting for an interview. All the other applications are being scored. So once we sort of look at how many of these applications are going to get invited for an interview, we then rank all the others based on the score list that we've set.
What in a residency application absolutely turns you off?
That is, I would say, okay, that's a difficult question. So sometimes when you say it turns me off, I would say if there are unexplained gaps in a residency application, um, it becomes imperative. Like for instance, if someone has trained abroad or has completed a residency in a different country or a different system, and for whatever reason has taken some time away from clinical medicine and is now re-entering training in the United States, and we see many such applications, and many of them are excellent. It becomes hard to tease out if there's no clear explanation for what's going on or why this has happened. So I think this is where a well-written personal statement really makes a difference, or when the applicant is very careful about explaining this in his CV. Because CV, when you have a sort of temporal list of your appointments, if there is a gap, it really is important that you explain why that is. And it could be as simple as, a trainee decided to take some time off to raise his or her young family, or for whatever other reason decided to step out of clinical medicine for a short period of time and is now re-entering the workforce. And that's great. So we just need to see an explanation for why they were out of medicine. So that would be one red flag that I would say. The other would be, lukewarm letters of recommendation,
Okay.
because that is usually a big red flag. There's no getting around it, because at the end of the day, you are picking 3 or 4 attendings to write you letters, and if they're unable to speak very well about you, that becomes a little bit of a problem. So that oftentimes either indicates that you haven't chosen the right attending, or for whatever reason there might be an issue with either your performance or something else in your professional work.
So what's your take on a personal statement? How helpful is it in your decision to invite the person for interview?
I kind of agree with you on that. It's interesting. I've always thought of personal statements as, they may not necessarily, so one of my colleagues once said that his view on personal statements was that a great personal statement can help you a little bit, but a really poorly written personal statement can really hurt you.
Yes.
So I think it's one of those things where sometimes people can overthink this. But I think what's important is, as you mentioned, use this as an opportunity. It's sort of one A4
Mm-hmm.
one A4 size paper of information to sort of present what makes you special and why you're attracted to a particular specialty or a particular program. And if you are able to sell yourself in a way that sets you apart from the other residents, it is a huge plus. And especially, as you mentioned, if you're getting over 180 applicants for one position, you want to make sure that, if you have some great attributes which are not reflected in your CV, you bring them up in your personal statement. Yeah.
How does faculty, think of letters where the letter, where the applicant has not waived his or her right to see the letter? Is that still, good enough for you, or does that raise some questions in the mind of a program director or an associate program?
Um, it it doesn't bother me too much because I am a foreign grad myself. I trained abroad, so it's much harder in that setting to actually waive the letter. At least at the time when I was applying, I had to personally collect those letters and actually sort of mail them to ECFMG. So the letters had the attendings were all waiving the rights. In the US setting, I would say for internal applicants, you trust the quality of the information in the letter more, I feel, when the applicant has not seen the letter, because you feel it's a confidential piece of information which, one mentor or supervisor is sending to a prospective sort of employer. So by keeping it, by waiving the rights, I think you trust the veracity of the information a little bit more.
What kind of U.S. clinical experience can an international medical graduate obtain, for anesthesiology?
Um, it depends on where you're coming from and what your training is. For instance, if you're a foreign medical graduate who is training, say, in a program which is affiliated to a medical institution, affiliated to an institution in the United States, oftentimes as part of their training, they are doing some rotations in the US. So that is, of course, viewed very differently because automatically you're getting letters of recommendation from your clinical experience in the US. So that's a different type of experience. We also occasionally get trainees who come and do clinical observerships.
Okay.
Clinical observerships, again, if it is from again, it depends on the quality of the letter and who is writing the letter. It really matters. Well, if a faculty member recognizes or knows the person who is writing the letter, that really makes a difference. Like if it's an alum or someone who they have a professional relationship with, you're much more likely to, trust the judgment of the person who is writing the letter. Or having worked in the institution's reputation matters too.
Mm-hmm.
If you happen to go to one of the Ivy League programs or work in a great lab with very well-known researchers or mentors, those letters will obviously carry a lot of weight. But again, these are all very general statements that I'm making. You make the decision based on each individual applicant and what the relationship is with the letter writer and how strongly the letter writer has recommended the applicant. Going back to the question about what kind of experience, it also depends on the institution. Our institution sort of expects that foreign medical graduates have at least 1 year of clinical experience in the U.S. Um, so that automatically, puts some applicants at a disadvantage, those who don't have that
Mm-hmm,
experience.
mm-hmm.
But again, that varies from institution to
Sure.
institution.
For anesthesiology, I'm sure there are categorical positions. Are there also do some, medical graduates, they do like a prelim year or a transitional year elsewhere and then come for the second year of anesthesiology? Is that how it works?
Absolutely.
Programs.
So most programs in anesthesiology these days are moving to a categorical um, program where the residents come and do their internships in the same program and then advanced into their clinical anesthesia years. Um, but anesthesia is a specialty which attracts trainees from other specialties. So it's not uncommon for us to get really good quality applicants from surgery or internal medicine who during their intern years realize that, anesthesia may be a better fit for them professionally, and or they got some exposure during their surgical time and were exposed to a great anesthesiologist, or they felt that that might be a better career choice for them. So it happens quite often that anesthesia gets trainees from other specialties joining us
Wow.
in our second year of training.
When you're interviewing an applicant, like maybe a U.S. medical graduate or international medical graduate,
Sure.
what exactly are you trying to assess in that half hour or so?
Um, I think by the time you've invited a candidate for an interview, you have looked at their applications, you've made some determination that, you feel that, this applicant is likely to be a good addition to the residency program. So I look at the interview process as very much a sort of, it's like a matching game where you're trying to see whether the resident is a right match for the program and whether the program offers everything that the resident is looking for. So it's an open dialogue. I try hard to find out what exactly the resident is looking for when you meet applicants, so you immediately know that some applicants are looking for, say, a research-heavy program,
Yes.
or some others are looking to become, excellent clinicians, but want to focus more on clinical education. So it's helpful if you're able to figure that out from your trainee and see what your program offers and trying to make sure that, that it's a good match both ways. And it's I find it a very exciting process because you're meeting all these bright young doctors, and you'd be happy to have any or all of them in your program, but trying to figure out who is most likely to be successful in your particular program with its particular strengths and weaknesses that's our job, um, and more often than not we get it right.
You're interviewing an applicant and then again something happens or something is being maybe the way they present or something is told to you that as a result of which you're like, okay, we're not going to take this applicant at all into our program. Does that ever happen?
Well, I think sometimes it does happen in that you see a CV or an application where on paper someone reads as like a very sort of bright, promising person,
Okay.
and you meet them in person, and for whatever reason, either it's they were not switched on that day, or they're tired from a long journey, or for whatever reason, their personality is, they're just not as much of a um, personality which does well in a one-on-one interview session, um, or someone who's shy. And that can be sometimes of a mismatch, right? Because when you look at it, you think, oh, wow, this is such a great applicant and he's going to be a great match for a program. And then you meet them in person and you're like, I'm not so sure now
Yes.
because, and also it also depends on what kind of a program you have. If you have a very large program, you have room for, different types of personalities, because there's room there. But
Yes.
if it's a much smaller program, you have to be very thoughtful about who you bring into the program because, um, unlike a big program, there's not a whole lot of room there for them.
Yes.
If there's anyone who stands out in the wrong way, it can affect the balance of the program.
I hear you. I hear you. Has it ever occurred to you, like when you're interviewing an applicant, you get a feel that maybe they've applied to other specialty and another specialty besides anesthesiology, and if so, I mean, do you upfront ask them, hey, have you applied for another specialty, or has that ever occurred to you?
So if it comes up, and I never look at that as a bad thing.
Okay.
So, if a resident explains that he has, a medical student explains that he has um, he's still uncertain between two specialties. We see that often in anesthesia. We get applicants for emergency medicine applying to anesthesia. There's similar kind of programs or specialties with a lot of overlap in terms of skills and
Mhm.
sort of acuity of cases. Um, so I don't look at that as a negative as long as they are able to articulate, why specifically they're looking at our program. Um, uh, in fact, one of our trainees who's matched this year into our program, who ranked very high in our application sort of rank order, was someone who was struggling to make a decision between two specialties, and she was very upfront about it. And
Okay.
again, if you're able to clearly say, why you are thinking the way you are and you're sort of struggling to make that decision, in our opinion, we were like, you need to come into anesthesia and we're going to do everything we can to recruit you because we saw that you'd be potentially a great addition to our program.
All right. After the interview process, do the thank you letters that the applicants send you, does that change your perspective of the applicant at all?
I think it's very polite,
Yes.
and expressing interest in a program and sending a note is definitely something that the program coordinator is very particular about forwarding it to us so we're able to see the personal messages, and it does go in their file. I again, these are small things, and I'm
Yes.
not so sure that it in the grand scheme of things it matters as much.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but when when you're making that final decision, you're also looking to see who's really interested in coming to your program. And when if a resident is particularly interested in a program and reaches out to us with a personal note, it just shows us that there is some level of commitment, and he's serious about his interest in the program. So we do take that into consideration.
How does the residency selection committee decide how to rank so many applicants that they have interviewed that season?
That is
This is going to be a
we
lengthy answer, yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. So as I talked about, every institution has its own sort of style of finalizing the list. In ours, we keep it so all the faculty who are on the committee get together and we look at our collated scores, and we
Yes.
look at the sort of applicants who were picked to be direct invites. And we actually review the final scores and create, just sort of tier our applicants, so that, um, it again, sort of just into broad categories.
Yes.
And then we do take some input from our residents as well, because our residents are very much involved in the whole recruiting process. They interact with the medical students, or the applicants, and also take them out for dinner. And just hearing their feedback is helpful, and it helps guide, make the final decision. But it's usually a very sort of team-based approach based on the interview performance. We're looking for reasons why, because we are based in Maine. So geographically, we are sort of tucked away in one part of the country. So we look for reasons why the trainee may want to actually come and live in Maine. Having that regional tie does help in that final decision making. But it's an overall sort of team-based approach based on their interview scores, their CV, and feedback from all the interviewers and the residents. So ultimately, it is the program director's choice, call. So in our program too, the final decision is always made by the program director. But again, there's usually he's not going to look at the selection committee's work and completely invert things.
Absolutely.
All he's going to do is just fine tune the list and see if there's any sort of final tweaking that needs to be done.
Absolutely.